Shabbat Shalom. Today's date is Saturday, March 10th, and we're going to be talking about the Dietary Law Explained. All right, so I know when talking about a lesson like this is one of those things where, you know, we've seen things there, and we're pretty certain that we've actually understood it for what it means and things like that, right? And we felt like there's nothing else to go into to look at it because we got it. Well, earlier this week, there was something, Sally had actually asked a question. She had sent Tara a message and she asked a question. And Sister Sally, I hope you don't mind me using the example because this is what happened. She had asked Tara, is chicken clean or unclean, right? And, you know, Tara was just like, you know, she didn't really understand the question, you know what I mean? And so it was one of those things where we, you know, Sally sent me a video. I watched the video in its entirety, and I actually, you know, was checking behind the brother and everything, looking at all the words and everything like that. And, you know, I came to conclusions based on the scriptures itself, but I'm not going to say what conclusions I came to, because I think this was a good exercise in actually helping us to actually define some things. So we're going to go through the scriptures and we're going to let everyone define it. You know, we're going to define the words and the terms, and then we're going to see what the scriptures say on this. We're not going to see what Brother CJ says. We're going to see what the scriptures say themselves. All right. So with that, let's go to the book of Leviticus, chapter 11. And we're going to start at verse 1. And I'm going to do the reading all here because this will help me in the flow that I'm establishing. So Leviticus 11, verse 1. It says, And the Most High spake unto Moses and to Aaron, saying unto them, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, These are the beasts which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Now we got to stop there, okay? Because in verse 2, when he says, These are the beasts, it's Hebrew 24:16. And I just want everybody to know we're going to be defining lots of terms today, all right? It's Hebrew 24:16. And the word there is kai, or it looks like K, C-H-A-Y. And it simply means anything that's actually alive. Now, when you go into Strong's, you see all these different terms there and all these different things, and based on what they've actually translated as. But when you really get to the root of it, all it means is something that's alive. But if you notice in that verse, it translates it as the English word beast. Now, why am I pointing this out? Because there was a lesson we did months ago entitled Study to Show Yourselves Approved, part 1. And we're going to do part 2 of it soon. And this here goes right back to that lesson about translations, because you're going to find out here that the actual translators translated certain words in English, but that's not in fact what the word is in English. So, for example, right here, this word, Hebrew 24:16, in that verse, kai, it means any living thing, but they translate it as beast. Now watch this. It says, which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. So you all see beasts is in the same verse a second time. But guess what? The second word beast is a completely different Hebrew word. Completely different. And that Hebrew word is Hebrew 929. So that's H929. And that's what we would call in English behemoth, or it's pronounced in Hebrew bahimah. All right. Now, when you look at this word, it actually does mean a beast, but not just any beast. It's talking about specifically 4-footed animals that are actually on the earth. Beast. All right. 4-footed or 4-legged animals. That's what it's actually talking about there. On the call there, can y'all make sure to mute your background? So it's talking about here any 4-footed animal on the earth. But if you guys notice though, in this verse in English, it's got beast there twice, but it's not talking about the same thing. The first word beast is Hebrew 24:16, kai, and it just simply means any living thing. And then the second word beast is Hebrew 9:29, which is talking about four-legged or four-footed animals on the earth. Now, I'm going to tell you, we're going to get to something as to why I'm showing you this a little bit later in this same chapter. So far, we got Leviticus 11:2 saying, these are the living things which you shall eat among all the four-footed creatures on the earth. All right? Keep this in mind, all right? Verse 3, whatsoever parteth the hoof and is cloven-footed and cheweth the cud among the beasts. This word beast there is the same beast, the second beast in Leviticus 11:2. Now, if anyone can't follow me, let me know, okay? But this beast in verse 3 of Leviticus 11 is the same beast, Bahimah, or behemoth, that's mentioned in Leviticus 11:2. Why am I saying this? Because Moses is talking about a specific set of animals. A specific set of animals. All right? Just so you know, this does not include all animals, though. I'll show you later. So he's talking about specific animals that actually are on there, that roam the earth as in cattle. All right? Now, he says that parteth the hoof. Now, that word there for hoof, bear with me just 1 second, okay? That word there for hoof, because I got to go through it one by one, it actually is really talking about, it's the Hebrew word 6541, and it's parke or parsa. Again, whoever's on the call, please mute the background, okay? And it's actually talking about a split hoof, all right? Cloven is, when they say something cloven, it means that it's actually divided, all right? So it has a divided hoof. And it says, and it cheweth the cud. Now that word for cud is Hebrew 16:25, and that's garah, and it means something that's actually thrown up from the throat and then chewed, in order to be chewed again. But that word cud is something that's thrown back up from the throat, all right? Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because here's the thing. If you're looking in your concordance, it really involves you stopping and meditating a bit, because the thing is, Brother Craig brought out a point before about James Strong, and it's very true. And the more you study the Bible, you see it, okay? That in the Strong's Concordance, and I'm going to show you today, there are times they don't know what it is. They just put it as something. I'm going to show you, though. But here's the thing. It's talking about animals that are four-footed, these beasts, all right, that are four-legged, four-footed, all right. I say cattle because cattle all have four legs, all right, that are actually on the earth, that have divided hooves, all right, that chew their vomit when they throw it up. So Moses says in verse 3, whatsoever parteth the hoof and is cloven-footed and cheweth the cud among the beasts, again, that beast there is Bahimah, behemoth, that shall you eat. So far in Leviticus 2 and 3, he's talking about the living things that actually roam the earth, all right? That actually have a divided hoof and then throw up their food and then chew it again, all right? That's why he said in verse 3 that cheweth the cud. The cud is what they threw up from their throat, and then they chew it again, all right? But look at verse 4. He says, nevertheless, these shall you not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the hoof, as the camel, because it cheweth the cud, but divided not the hoof. He is unclean to you. Now, I want to bring a distinction here to let you guys know. Now Moses is telling us what we are not to eat among those group of among animals that either divide the hoof, have a divided hoof, or chew their vomit. So why am I saying this? Because in every set of animals that we go through today, Moses is going to tell us which ones we are to eat and which ones we are not to eat. Very important to remember that. There's a pattern that's going on in Leviticus here, where he's telling us in every set, in every group of animals, which ones to eat and which ones not to eat. All right? So now he tells us, okay, in verse 3, again, whatever has a divided hoof and chews its vomit, that's what you're going to eat. But then verse 4, Nevertheless, these are those that you shall not eat of them that chew the cud or of them that divide the hoof. And then he mentions, look at this, a camel. Now, I'm going to show you something here with this here word here, camel. All right. It's Hebrew 1581 and it's pronounced gamal. And actually, when you look at the definition of it, it's any beast that's used for labor or carrying burdens or things. Now, by the simple fact that they translated this camel in English, but it simply means, and I'm going to read to you exactly out of the Strong's what it says. It says, apparently from 1580 in the sense of labor or burden bearing. All right. So here's the thing. It does mean an animal that's used for carrying burdens or labors. Now, the question you should be asking yourself right now is, why did they translate that as camel? And here's the reason why I say that, because don't we know that actually other animals besides camels are used for carrying burdens, like an ox or a bison? So if other animals can be used to actually carry burdens, why do they translate it as a camel? Because there's nothing there that's identifying per se a camel. The definition is simply something that's used to carry labors or burdens. It could be any animal that you use. It could be a donkey. It could be a horse. Does everyone see that point? Okay, somebody. Yes. Okay, Tara. Okay, gotcha. If somebody on the call does not see that point, let me know. But this could be any animal. But in English, they do translate it as camel. See, this is why, like Brother Craig mentioned before, months ago, you gotta watch the Strongs. Because here's the thing. So far, Moses hasn't named any animal by name. He's giving characteristics of animals, attributes. All right? But the fact of the matter is that a beast for carrying burdens could be more than just a camel. It could be a donkey. It could be an elephant. I'm sure most of us know that in some parts of the world they use elephants for carrying things. We even see it on movies. All right? So the fact of the matter is when he says a camel, because he cheweth the cud and divided not the hoof, he is unclean to you. We don't know that we can see right there that Moses did not say camel. That's just what the translators translated in a burden-laden beast. They translated it as camel. But again, it could be a donkey or a horse or anything that's used to carry something. But the distinguishing factors in that verse is that it's something that actually chews the cud but does not divide the hoof. So if anyone knows what a camel's foot looks like, all right, then you know that the bottom of a camel's foot are soft and they have more or less a toe in the front of it. They have toes. They don't actually have hooves. So that's why a camel would be unclean, because of the fact that it actually doesn't have a divided hoof. But guess what? A donkey doesn't have a divided hoof either. So you see my point is that this could be any animal. That Moses is simply talking about an animal that actually chews the cud but doesn't divide the hoof. So if it doesn't have a divided hoof, you can't eat it. That's what he's saying. I'm going to show you continue more examples. Verse 5, and the coney, because he cheweth the cud but divided not the hoof, he is unclean to you. So what is Moses again saying? The same thing like in verse 4. He's telling you, he told us what we could eat, which is animals that actually have a divided hoof and they cheweth their vomit. But now he's saying, you can't eat animals that do one without the other. So for example, let's look at this word for coney. Now, when you look at the word for coney, it's Hebrew 8227, chiffon. And you're going to be surprised by what this actually means. It's talking about, now in Strong's, they say a species of rock rabbit from its hiding, i.e. probably the hyrax or coney. Did anyone notice it said probably the hyrax or coney? See, when we're defining scriptures, we can't be probably. We have to know. We got to understand what it actually means. So what do we need to do? We need to find out what is the actual Hebrew word there mean, that it translates as a coney. It means something that hides or conceals itself. Now guess what else I'm about to shock you with? That same word there, Hebrew 8:227, that chiffon, that they translate as a coney here in this verse in Leviticus, it's also not translated and left chiffon in 30 other times in the King James Bible. And guess guess what that actually is? Those are the names of other Hebrews. For example, one was a secretary or a scribe of King Josiah. Another one was the father of Ahikam, which was in the time of Josiah as well. Another one was the father of a Hebrew named Elasah, all right, during the time of Jeremiah. Another was a scribe and the father of Gemariah. Another was the father of Jaazaniah during the time of Ezekiel. So y'all got to ask yourself a question here. Wait a minute. Chiffon, you telling me is a coney? When actually that was the name of all these other Hebrew men. Why do you think these other Hebrew men had this name chiffon? Because remember, the Most High gave names according to attributes of people, right? We just read how Leah before, when she was talking about all the children she had, she gave them names according to attributes. Like, for example, when she had Judah, she said, now we would call his name Judah because of her praise for the Most High. Judah means praise. So are you telling me that all these men were named chiffon because they were rabbits or conies? No. There was some attribute of them that means that was meaning that they either were good at hiding themselves or hiding something or hiding things. The word there, everybody, is chiffon, and it means to hide something, to conceal something. But in good old King James translates it as a coney. I hope everybody sees this. All right. Moses is giving attributes. Moses didn't give the name of an animal. He gave attributes of animals. Now, yes, you can say, well, brother, you're still talking about a coney or a rabbit, though, because it does hide itself, right? But that's not the point of what Moses was saying. Moses is still talking about you can eat something that chews the cud and has a divided hoof. But he's saying you can't eat something. If I were to translate Leviticus 11:5, what he's really saying there, he would be saying something that actually hides itself. You cannot eat it because it may chew its vomit, but it doesn't have a divided hoof. Now, I hope everybody can actually understand what I'm saying, okay? Because actually not what I'm saying, but understand what the scriptures are saying there, all right? Because if I look at verse 5 and everything in the even in the BBE, it says, and the rock badger for the same reason is unclean to you. So again, they're giving us names of animals there, but the fact of the matter is that's not what Moses was doing. Moses wasn't giving us a name. So let's look at verse 6. He says, and the hare, because it cheweth the cud, but divided not the hoof, he's unclean to you. Now let's define that word for hare. And here's the thing, what it says in the Strongs. It says of uncertain derivation, the hare. And it says probably an extinct animal because no known hare chews its cud. Exact meaning is unknown. Is best left untranslated as the Hebrew word arnabeth. Again, H768. Now, y'all got to ask yourself a question here. If Strong's is telling you that they don't know what it means, why did they translate it as a hare? In English, we know what a hare is. A hare is a rabbit. But Strong's does not know what it is. So instead of actually translating it as a hare, why don't they just leave it as the Hebrew word instead? I hope everybody sees this because, like I said, this is where Brother Craig was talking about. We have to watch the Strongs. Moses' point is still, you can't eat some things that actually chew their vomit but don't have a divided hoof. So you may say, well, brother, what is a hare? And I will tell you, I don't know what an arnabeth is. I just know that in English they translated arnabeth as a hare. And in English, a hare is a rabbit. But Moses didn't say a rabbit. I hope everybody sees that. Verse 7. And the swine, though he divide the hoof and be cloven-footed, he cheweth not the cud, he is unclean to you. Now, in English, a swine is what? A pig. That is Hebrew 2386. It is kazir. But let's see what it means. It says, an unused root, probably meaning to enclose. A hog, perhaps, is penned. A boar or a swine. Now here's the thing. Again, in English we know what a swine is, a pig. And they say probably to enclose. So once again we have a situation where Strong's doesn't know what animal this is, do they? So the only thing we can do is go by the attribute, because so far in Leviticus, Moses still hadn't gave us any animals. But he's given us words that in English, we don't really know what the word translates to in English. All we know is that the best thing we can go on is that they say here, meaning to, probably meaning to enclose. They said from a root word, meaning to, probably to enclose. And so they translated, of course, as swine, which was what we call a pig or a boar. Now, something interesting about pigs, I don't know if you guys know, that pigs actually do enclose themselves in mud. And why do they do this? Pigs do this because they don't have sweat glands, and they enclose themselves in mud and water in order to keep their temperature down in their bodies. Because they don't have sweat glands, they don't have any other way to keep their temperature down. Now you may say, no, brother, you're overreaching there. Well, let me define to you what it means to enclose something. It means to surround it, to close in on all sides. And then as in with a fence or a wall is one way you can enclose or surround something. All right. It also means to hold or contain something. Do you not realize that when a pig actually encloses itself with mud all around itself, it is actually doing what enclose means. It's surrounding itself with mud and water because it doesn't have sweat glands. So when you look at that verse there, did Moses specifically say a pig? No. He was talking about something at best that encloses itself, even if it actually is, it has a divide, even though it actually has a divided hoof, it doesn't chew up its vomit. So again, Moses is giving attributes, and then he's showing, and there's some Hebrew words we don't have a clear, definite meaning, but by that word swine, something enclosed, all right, probably, I know, as Strong says, but the fact of the matter is this: Moses is giving attributes, and then he gives examples of examples or attributes of certain things that have certain characteristics, and he's saying these are the things you don't eat, these things with these characteristics, but he doesn't specifically name an animal. Verse 8, of their flesh, and that word flesh there is talking about their body, all right, them. You shall not eat, in their carcass you shall not touch, they are unclean to you. So, remember, we've had a group of animals here, okay? Where it was talking about the behemoth, the beast, which are actually on the land, like cattle, all right? The only ones we can eat are ones that have a divided hoof and they chew up their vomit. That's the only thing. And then the King James translates in English words in English. But that's why I went through each and defined them. Because a camel is what is defined as camel. The Hebrew word just simply means any beast that's used for carrying labors or burdens. But of course, like I said, again, that could be a camel. It could be a donkey. It could be an elephant. It could be a horse. It could be a cow. It could be a bison. All right. It could be any animal used to carry burdens. The determining factor is, does the animal have a divided hoof and does it chew up its vomit? That's the defining factors there. We went through the hair, all right? And the fact of the matter is that in Strong's we saw that they don't even know what it is. But they translated it as hair. Don't you see that by defining it as a hair, that gives an English reader a certain idea of what it's talking about? So we as English speakers would think, okay, it's talking about a hare, it's talking about a rabbit. But Moses didn't say a rabbit. Or when it said the coney, Hebrew 8:227, shaphan, it simply means something that hides or conceals itself. But also I showed you how 30 different times the same word is shaphan is the name of 30 different of Hebrews that it's talking about in the Bible. So we know that the Most High gave names according to attributes to people. So it's simply talking about someone or something that hides itself. Then we talked about swine, Hebrew 23:86, which is, they say, probably something enclosed. Well, we know that a pig is a type of animal that encloses itself with mud and water to keep its temperature down because it doesn't have sweat glands. But again, Moses was simply talking about if something does one of these things without the other, you can't eat it. All right. So there's a pattern being shown here. All right. We're going to go through groups of animals, because here's the thing. If you think about everything, all right, everybody would actually concede that a cow is way different than a pig, correct? Just like a donkey is way different than a cow. But yet Moses groups them all together because they're all what we would consider cattle or beasts that roam on the earth. Now, we're going to get to some other things here. Let's get to Leviticus 9 because to show this pattern. And Moses said in verse 9, "These shall ye eat of all that are in the waters. Whatsoever hath fins and scales in the waters, in the seas, and in the rivers, them shall you eat." Now, don't we see a pattern here forming? Now, Moses is talking about now whatever's in the waters. But I'm sure everybody would know that a shark is different than a catfish. A shark is different from a whale. But does Moses make any distinction from them based on what they're called? See, we have to remember in English, we call different animals certain things and we group them according to groups, right? But those are not the same groups necessarily that the Most High grouped them in. The Most High is simply talking about anything that lives in the water. Anything. Now, that can include a shark, a whale, a catfish, a white perch, salmon, tuna. Does everyone see that? Moses is talking about whatever lives in the water. He's not talking about the difference between them. He's talking about whatever lives in the waters. And then he gives two defining things. And before I move forward, that word for water is H4325. And it means any type of watery substance. All right, I mentioned that because when you look in Strong's, they translate it as, it's translated as, and I'm just saying what they translated as, piss, which we know would be urine, water springs, washing, water course, water flood, watering. It's translated as all these different things that would be water. Now, somebody may say, well, brother, how could it translate it as urine or piss, as it says there? We know that when the Bible mentions piss, it's talking about urinating. Well, here's the thing. There are actually, when someone actually does urinate, there are cells or bacteria that are alive that are in the urine when it's coming out, and they die soon afterward. So again, you see how Moses didn't make no distinguishing thing here? Talking about anything living in the water. We know we shouldn't be drinking urine because it's waste product, but I'm saying that because someone will say, well, brother, it's translated as urine also. But the fact of the matter is there are cells that live in urine that actually die soon after a person urinates. So again, we're still on scripture here because Moses is talking about anything that lives in waters. That's the reason why I said when you define it, it's going to be any watery substance. Now, Strong's even says juice, or by euphemism, urine or semen. Even if you were to include semen, the fact of the matter is that in semen, there are living cells, which is how the woman gets pregnant. There are living cells that fertilize the ovaries in a woman, which in turn makes her pregnant. So again, we're still on scripture, but because we're talking about any living thing in water. But check this out. Moses gives distinguishing characteristics to show whether you can eat them or not. He says they have to have fins, which is Hebrew 5579. And it actually means something used to flee or propel. And I don't know how to pronounce the word. It's centipede. I think it's pronounced centipede. But the fact of the matter is, that word fins, Hebrew 5579, is something that's defined to use to flee or propel. But then he also says, and scales in the waters, and in the seas, and in the rivers, them shall you eat. That word for scales is Hebrew 7193, and it's kakiseth, and it means to shell or consolidate multiple pieces together to form either a coat of scales or a coat of metal. Now you may say, brother, well, why do you say that? Say that because the same word is translated as male one time in the scriptures in the book of, what is it? Where is it? In the book of 1 Samuel 17. Verse 5, when it says, when it's talking about Goliath, and he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. So that shows you that Goliath had on some type of coat of metal that had multiple metal pieces that were together to form a coat. I hope, does this make sense?
Yes.
So the thing is, Moses is giving characteristics of everything that lives in the water. In verse 9, it's got to have fins. Again, that's 5579, and scales 7193. And it has to actually, so something that propels it, that is used to propel itself, or something, and something that it has a coat of something, a coat of, scales, fins, things like that. It has to have some kind of coating it or covering it. He says, that is what you shall eat. So do we notice here that when they translate verses 9 through 12, do y'all notice they don't name any fish specifically in English in these verses? Notice the translators don't do it here. But in the verses before, when it was talking about the beast, they name a camel, a hare, a coney, and a swine. But then I define the words for you in the Hebrew, and you see it's not talking about a specific animal in English. It's talking about whatever animal fits those attributes that Moses is talking about, that's naming. So see, they couldn't do this when Moses was talking about the fish, because the translators was like, well, we can't actually name any animals here in English because of the characteristics given. Only thing you can do is follow the characteristics. So how do we know whether we can eat a shark or not? Because a shark has fins, but it doesn't have scales. How do we know whether we can eat a salmon? Because a salmon has fins and scales. That's how we know. But we don't need to know whether it's a shark or a whale or a salmon. All we got to do is look at the attributes. Now I want to stop for a second. On the call, please everybody respond with a yes or no. Do you see where we're going with this? Do you see where Moses is talking about? Attributes. He's not named any animals yet. Does everyone see that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right, good, because I want to make sure that's clear before we move forward, because now we're going to get into where they got all these animals named, all right? And, I want to take this time to thank Sister Sally for something she said that caused me to go and research this more in depth. So thank you, Sister Sally, because this was right on time. So we see that verse 10, and all that have not fins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, and all that move in the waters, same word for waters, and any living, and let me stop you guys to see what you can see here. That word living there, Hebrew 24:16, the same word that they translated as a beast in verse 2. Why am I pointing this out? Because I'm telling y'all, see how King James does this stuff? When one place he'll translate that word, Hebrew 24:16, kai, he'll translate it as a beast. But then we saw the word for beast, which is bahima or bahima. But in another place, he'll translate it as live, and another place creature, and another place running, and another place a living thing. Don't y'all see the problem with that? That's confusing. That's why Brother Craig was right on time about that point. You got to watch the concordance. But I'll say what I said before too. Even when Brother Craig brought that point, was the truth is always there among the lie, though. You could still always find the truth. If you got the Most High on your side, he'll always still show you the truth. But that word kai simply means any living thing. So you see King James, they translated as beast in verse 2, but here they translated in verse 10 as living. I'm just saying, you got to see this stuff for yourself to see what I'm talking about. But we know he's talking about any living thing in the waters. It's got to have fins and scales. Verse 11, they shall be, because in verse 10 again, he says, and all that have not fins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, and all that move in the waters, and any living thing which is in the waters, they shall be an abomination unto you. Verse 11, they shall be even abomination unto you. You shall not eat of their flesh, but you shall have their carcasses in abomination. Verse 12, whatsoever have no fins nor scales in the waters, that shall be an abomination unto you. So, let's make sure we understand a couple things so far. So far, we covered, two separate groups of animals. All right? We cover the animals that roam the actual earth, which the Bible calls behemoths. But then we covered the things in the waters. Did anybody notice that of all these things in the waters, Moses never called them behemoths? Anybody notice that? They weren't called behemoths, were they? Because why? They are not behemoths. But guess what? In good old English language, would not they call a whale a beast? Would not they call a shark a beast? Yes. In English, we call all those things beasts because we group all the animals as animals together. But the Most High never called them a beast. He just said the living things in the waters. The only thing he called a beast, bahima, was actually things that roam on the earth. I hope you guys see that. It's a distinguishing characteristic. If you don't, stop me. So, we talked about the beast, the bahima. But good old King James translated Kai, Hebrew 24:16, as beast and living. But we know that a beast is a beast and a living thing is a living thing. So let's put this in reality here, okay? We ourselves are living things. That word Kai even applies to us. To distinguish, Kai doesn't mean a beast. It means anything living. That applies to humans, fish, behemoths, or fowl. I mentioned fowl because we're about to talk about that. Verse 13, and these are they which ye shall have an abomination among the fowls. They shall not be eaten. Now, again, we have to do the same thing. We have to define some terms here. So, fowls. That's Hebrew 5775. And the word there is ophe in Hebrew. And it means, get this, it actually means anything that has wings. Now let's look at how Strong's even gives some defining things here, because I'm going to show you something. Again, I'm going to show you the truth among the lie. When you look at Strong's, it says flying creatures, fowl, insects, birds, winged insects. Now I'm going to show you something but then when you look in the definition, it says a bird as covered with feathers, or rather as a covering with wings, collectively a bird that flieth, flying fowl. So you notice in biblical usage, they even show you in Strong's that it also includes insects. Now you may say, well, brother, I don't really believe that, but guess what? I'm going to show you. The scriptures is right on. Because remember how we talked about the behemoths that Moses talked about in the first few verses? Versus the fish. I said fish. Moses didn't say fish, though. He said the things in the waters. Notice he called the things on land behemoths. He called the things in the waters just simply things in the waters. Now we're getting to fowl, which is talking about anything with wings. It could fly. It may not fly. Most of the time, though, anything with wings pretty much flies, right? But he's talking about all things that have wings. It's very important that we understand that, because we need this going forward. But this does include insects. It's referring to anything that can fly or has wings. But again, fowls is what he calls these things. He don't call them beast. Bahima, which is Hebrew 9:29, which was mentioned in verse 2. The Most High doesn't refer to birds as beast like a man does, because if you see a vulture, don't you think that's a beast? Yeah, we would say it's a beast. But the Most High didn't say that. So look at here. He says in verse 13, among the fowls, remember fowls, anything that has wings, Hebrew 5:775, they shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle. Now let's define that word eagle. That word there is Hebrew 5404. And Strong says it's an eagle or a vulture or a griffin. But look at what the meaning is. It's the word nesher, and it means to lacerate. Does anyone know what lacerate means? Well, to lacerate means that to tear something or mangle it. All right? It also can mean to distress or torture mentally or emotionally or wound deeply. But to lacerate something, the main definition is to tear something or mangle it. Now, do not more than just eagles lacerate things? Of course. There are other things that lacerate things. So I got to ask you a question. Did Moses say an eagle? Or did he just simply say something that tears things? Right, virtue, right, good. Thank you, son. He's talking about something that tears something. But let's continue on. He says in the ossifrage, let's define ossifrage. It's Hebrew 6538. And the word is pronounced Perez. And they translate it as birds of prey, perhaps again, a bearded vulture or ossifrage, perhaps an extinct animal, the exact meaning unknown. Now Strong's tells you that, but then right in the definition he tells you it's a claw. A claw. The root word of it is Hebrew 6536. So what is Hebrew 6536? It's parak. All right? Now, that's the root where it comes from, but it's not exactly the same. It means something broken in pieces. You may say, well, that's interesting because guess what? That word parak is the same word used to divide. That when it's talking about an animal, a bahima, that has a parted hoof. So we see that it comes from the word that means something parted or divided. But so if we were to now take that definition, we see that Hebrew 6538, Perez, it means simply a claw. It's a claw. Now again, aren't there multiple flying things that have claws? Eagles have claws. Chickens have claws. Vultures have claws. When you actually look at the feet of birds, all their feet look alike. Kid you not, all you got to do is go on Google and Google the images of their feet. But we're going to get somewhere, okay? So Moses so far did not say an eagle. He did not say an ossifrage. Moses said something that lacerates and has claws. Let's look at the other word, and the osprey. What's an osprey? That's Hebrew 58:22. And it's ozniah in Hebrew. Now, look at what Strong's defines it. An unclean bird of prey, an osprey, a black eagle, a buzzard, perhaps an extinct bird, exact meaning unknown, but then gives a definition. They said probably the sea eagle from its strength, osprey. So ozniah, we need to figure out, okay, what actually is an ozniah? Well, the fact of the matter is that if we're looking in the Strongs, we don't really know, do we? When you look in a lexicon, it says a species of an eagle, so called from the acuteness of his vision. Then they say, unless perhaps something strong and powerful. Y'all see where I'm going with this? Moses is given an attribute. He did not say an osprey. The only thing that the Strongs give us that we know is clear is that, well, they say a bird, either an eagle or some other like it. All we know is something that has wings but we don't know if it's an osprey or an eagle or a buzzard or whatever. Now it says probably feminine of Hebrew 5797, which is something that has strength, that's strong, that's powerful, that's mighty, that's bold. All right? Something majestic. So, if we take the root or where it comes from or what they say is probably a derivative of, what did Moses say in verse 13? Of all the flying things, fowl, that you should not eat, they're an abomination, something that lacerates, something that has claws, something that's mighty or strong. Look at verse 14. And the vulture. Well, again, what's a vulture? Hebrew 1676. Da'ah. They said probably a fast flying bird of prey, a kite. But let's look at the definition. It says something that has rapid flight. Okay. Don't y'all see that multiple birds have rapid flight? What about those seagulls that actually can fly real fast over the water and dart in the water and get something and then fly right out of it? What about, it could be an eagle, it could be a vulture, it could be a hawk. It could be what's they call a talon, which is another bird like a hawk. Or it could be a phoenix, which they say is extinct now. My point is does everyone see that Moses ain't talking about a vulture? Moses is simply still giving an attribute. But look at what good old Strong's translated vulture, and he says in the definition of da'ai, a kite. But look at this. Don't y'all see kite is in this very same scripture in English? And it's a different Hebrew word. When y'all see this stuff, when we see this stuff, we should start asking questions and say, wait a minute, hold up. Something's wrong here with the translation. Because when you look up vulture, Hebrew 1676, they say the definition is a kite. But when what it's actually talking about is something that has rapid flight, something that flies fast. But then he gives a kite in the same scripture. And that word for kite is Hebrew 344. That's H344. And it's pronounced ayah. And they translate it as a hawk, a fountain, or a kite. But guess what the definition is? It's a screamer. Something that screams. Don't eagles do this? Don't hawks do this? I'm telling y'all know I'm out here in the country, right? I hear them and see them in the sky all the time circling over prey. They scream, ack, ack, whatever, it's a poor way of doing it, but you guys get the point. So, it's a screamer. So Moses has said so far, these are the things that are abomination among the flying things that shall not be eaten. The eagle, which we know is not really an eagle, is talking about something that lacerates or tears. The ossifrage, which again, we know is something that has claws. The osprey, which is osnia, which they say is probably one of these things or whatever, but from the best definition we can get is something that's strong. The vulture, which we know is something there that has rapid flight. It's not saying a vulture. The kite, which is a screamer after its kind. So again, Moses gave attributes. He did not name an animal. Verse 15. And the raven after its kind. What's a raven? That's Hebrew H6158. Oriv. And it means something that has a dusky hue. It comes from the word Hebrew 6150, which is Arav. It looks like Arab. And it's something, and it is talking about something that's dusky, like, for example, like sundown, when you see the way that they call it dusk or dawn. So it's something dark in color, something dusky in its color. So, hold on, wait a minute. Dusky in its color, that means it's dark colored. Don't we see that there's multiple birds that can be dark colored? Please tell me everybody on the call sees this. Something dark colored. But they translated it as a raven. Terry, you see this? Mm-hmm. So let's ask a question here. Aren't some chickens dark colored? Don't chickens have claws? Again, I'm not telling everybody what to believe or anything. I'm simply going by the attributes that Moses gave. We have to talk about the animals according to what Moses said, and then examine the animals and see, do they fit the characteristics of what Moses is saying? And don't worry, we're going to get to a defining characteristics that we're going to really define what we can eat among flying things. So he said the raven after its kind. Verse 16, and the owl. Now look at this, they give two words for owl, right? One is Hebrew 13:23, H13:23, which is bath. Now, I'm sure Sister Merlene already, because I mentioned you, Sister Merlene, because, you like our Hebrew scholar among us, you know what I mean? She already knows that's a daughter. That means a daughter, or it can actually mean first. It's talking about offspring, but usually bath is referring to feminine offspring like a daughter, whereas ben would be referring to a son. So, King James translates it as an owl, but it's bath, a daughter. Y'all starting to get the point here? Why does it translate daughter or a feminine as an owl? Then in Hebrew 32:84, same thing for owl. It's ya'anah. And they translated it as an owl, of course, right there, same verse. They say an owl, an ostrich, literally translated as daughters of the owl. Probably an extinct bird, the exact meaning unknown. This is what Strong says, okay? And then they say feminine of Hebrew 32:83, meaning the same. Well, what is Hebrew 32:83? They said probably the ostrich from its answering cry. All right? Something, and then when you go into the actual, when you go into a lexicon, it's talking about something that's greedy, or is that a glutton? Now, y'all see how we got all this stuff from owl. So let me ask y'all a question again. Did Moses say an owl, or did he give characteristics? You all know the answer to that. He gave characteristics. Because in verse 17, it's got little owl there. But we're not at verse 16 and 17 yet. Let's continue with verse 16. So, and the owl, the best thing we can come up with this definition is something that's a daughter or an offspring, that's a feminine offspring of a bird that's gluttonous. So some type of offspring, a feminine offspring that has a glutton appetite. That's the best we can come up with. But Moses didn't say an owl. But then look at the same verse, and the nighthawk. Well, what's a nighthawk? Y'all see where we're going with this. We're going to define these terms so you can see it. That's Hebrew 84:64, and it's tachmus. Strong says, and species of unclean bird from its violence, perhaps an owl, perhaps an owl. It's from the word Hebrew 2554, which is kamak. And guess what it means? Something that's violent. Something that does violence. And also it means to do wrong or wrongfully, to treat violently. But we know it's talking about something to do with violence. So what is Moses saying? You can't eat birds that are also violent. Now, I'm going to tell you something. There's all sorts of birds that are violent. And the thing is, I know I keep bringing up chicken, but I'm getting to a point, you're going to see it. I'm a country boy. Y'all know that. I grew up around chickens. Do you know sometimes, and this is graphic, but sometimes roosters will rape the hens over and over again all day till they kill them. Did you know sometimes the roosters, when they're actually mating with the hens, they actually lacerate, they tear the back of the hen's neck because they use their beak, their beak to actually hold her down while they're raping her. I'm sorry if this is violent, but that's the point, to show you that the attributes of an animal that we've said is clean. And we're going to find out for sure if it's clean or not. But so far, chicken actually matches some of the characteristics Moses got, which is something violet. There are chickens that are dark in color, but they translated it as a raven. Okay? I'm just saying, I'm just giving you examples. Chickens have talons, claws. But again, this is not necessarily about chicken. This is about you actually seeing for yourself, according to the scriptures, what it says we can eat and not eat. And that's why we're going into all these definitions of what they define the animals as. We're looking at the attributes, because Moses haven't named any animals. He's named simply attributes. And we're to examine each animal to see, does that animal fit that attribute? So, again, the owl, which again, if we were to define it as something, a feminine creature that flies, that's gluttonous. That's all. That's the best we can define it. The nighthawk, something that's violent. Moses didn't say nighthawk. He says something that's violent. We're still talking about flying creatures that have wings and are fly that have these attributes. Then it says in the cuckoo, which is, what's a cuckoo? That's Hebrews 78:28, which is shakaf. Again, they translate it as some kind of ceremonially unclean bird. Then they say maybe an extinct bird. Exact meaning unknown. But it comes from the definition. It actually means something that peels or emaciates. All right? Now, what does it mean to emaciate? Well, let's define that word. That means to make abnormally lean or thin by the gradual wasting away of flesh. All right? What does it mean to peel? To strip of something. It could be like to strip your skin or weight or whatever. But it means to strip itself gradually and everything to make itself lean. All right? That's what it's saying. That by definition, that's what it is. That's a cuckoo. So again, did Moses say, and of course they left that translated as a cuckoo, right? And you know, there are multiple birds that are called cuckoos. You know what I mean? As a matter of fact, did you know that there is a species of roosters, which are chickens, that are called cuckoos? I'm telling you, I'm not making this stuff up. You can Google it for yourself. All right? Then it says in the hawk. Well, what's a hawk? That's Hebrew 53:22. They say it's a blossom, an unclean bird of prey, a hawk, a falcon, perhaps an extinct bird, exact meaning unknown. Y'all see the pattern here? Strong keeps telling us exact meaning unknown. Then he gives all these different animals that it could be. But let's look at the definition. The definition is a flower from its brilliancy, from its flashing speed. Well, we got to get the root of it then, which is H5340, which is nasats. And what does it mean? It means something brightly colored. So again, that's why it says in the original word, from its brilliancy. If we look at something and we say it's brilliant, we're talking about a lot of times that it could be something shiny or something that's actually colorful. When you look at the root word, it's talking about something colorful. So again, Moses didn't say a hawk there. And I've shown you how all these different words, they translate in English as certain animals. Strong's tells you multiple times that these are the same animals, just probably this, probably that. The only thing we can go on, everybody, is the attribute of the animal. So it's something that's brightly colored. Again, how many birds you know that are not brightly colored? I'm just saying, this is the scriptures. Verse 17, and the little owl. Well, what's a little owl? Hebrew 35:63. And it means something, it means to hold together something, as in a cup or a container. They say also some unclean bird, probably an owl, because from its cup-like cavity of its eye. Then they say compare Hebrew 35:99. Well, what's Hebrew 35:99? Kes. It is talking about a cup, a bag used for carrying something. Well, let's think about something here. Aren't there birds or flying things that actually have a cup where they can carry their young in? Everybody see where I'm going with this? They have a container in their mouth. They can carry something in it. Remember, we're still talking about flying things. We're not even talking about behemoths. All right? We're talking about anything that flies. So, again, Moses gave an actual definition. He gave an attribute. Well, it says in the cormorant. Let's look up what is a cormorant. That's Hebrews 7:994. The word there is shalak. Again, Strong says this is a bird of prey, some kind of bird of prey. All right. Then they said thought to be the pelican because of its casting itself into the sea. Well, this gives us a hint. Let's look up where it comes from. It comes from the word Hebrews 7:993, which is also shalak. And what does it mean? To throw out, to cast down, to hurl, to pluck, to throw. So this will be like those, and I mentioned it before, those birds that actually go down. They cast themselves down, like to pick up something. That could be a seagull, that could be an eagle, that could be a vulture, that could be, well, not necessarily a vulture, because a vulture actually comes after that already dead. But it could be a hawk, an eagle, could be a seagull. Don't you see? Don't y'all see this? Moses is giving attributes. And the great owl, verse 17. What's a great owl? Hebrew 32:44. Yanshuf. Apparently they say from 5398, an unclean aquatic bird, probably, there's that word probably again, the heron, from its blowing cry. All right? Well, let's look at what does it mean. All right? And so it's from the word H5398, which is nashaf. And what does it mean? To blow. As in wind. So let me ask y'all a question. Has anybody ever seen those birds that actually puff up when they're actually blowing and then they blow out a noise? That they like blow, it's like they get real big when they're like sucking in or whatever air or whatever. I'm serious. It's an actual bird like that. I've seen it on the nature shows. All right? So it's some type of thing that blows. I know it's crazy because that definition may seem rudimentary, right? But this is all we can go on. We know we got to watch Strong's, and we got to go to the closest thing. So when there's not a definition there, we need to go to the root to try to figure out what it is. Verse 18, and the swan. What's a swan? I know what we think about when we see a swan. We think about a duck, correct? But it's Hebrew 8580. And again, he gives all his little definitions of Strong's. But look at what it says. Properly a hard breather. Then they say a lizard and a bird. Perhaps, there's that word perhaps again. But the thing is, it's something that is a hard breather. Let's go to the root of it, which is Hebrew 5395, nasham. And it's talking about something that pants, like for anyone that doesn't know, there are some birds that actually are hard breathers. But it's talking about something that blows, something that's a hard breather. Again, Moses is given attributes. And the pelican, verse 18, Hebrews 68:93. What is it talking about? It says probably the pelican. So again, Strong's doesn't know what it is. He's just saying it's probably this. Same word is translated as pelican, they translate 2 times as a cormorant. Remember, y'all, we saw cormorant in the same chapter. Okay, but that cormorant was a different Hebrew word. Somebody's lying. And we know it's got to be the Strong's or the translators. And I'm not accusing the translators of malfeasance. I'll say probably in most cases the translators try to get it right. But you guys know I always say about the King James, translations. This is why you got to go through these words, because we were just told before a cormorant. Now we got a whole different word that Strong's tells us is also a cormorant. Okay, somebody's lying, because in verse 17, cormorant is Hebrew 7994, but in verse 18, we have a pelican, which is H6893, which Strong's also tells us is a cormorant. But anyway, that aside, what does it mean? It's talking about something that vomits. So this is some kind of flying creature, because remember, we're still talking about the fowls. Flying creatures, something that has wings that vomits. Well, one thing that vomits is a fly, correct? Flies vomit. So again, Moses is given an attribute. Again, verse 18, and the gear eagle. What is a gear eagle? Hebrew 7360. Rakam. They say it's a kind of vulture. That is something that's supposed to be, they say it's a kind of vulture, but let's look at what it actually means. It's talking about something that's compassionate or shows love. That's what it's talking about. Something that actually shows love or something that's compassionate. And when you look in the lexicon, it's talking about specifically something flying that actually shows affection towards his young. Well, guess what? There are multiple flying things that do that, correct? Normal birds do that. Eagles do that. Storks do that. My point is that there are multiple birds or flying things that can fit these different characteristics that Moses is giving. Verse 19, and the stork. What's a stork? H2624. That's it's almost like Cassadia, which is Sister Donica's Hebrew name, but it's not Cassadia, it's Cassida. And it means a maternal type flying animal. It's some type of flying animal that's maternal, that has maternal instincts. It comes from the Hebrew word 2623, which is kased, which means something that's pious, something that's saintly, something that's kind, something that's merciful. But the thing is, it's some type of flying thing that's actually maternal, all right? Or that's the best definition we can give from it. It says in the heron, which is Hebrew H601. Don't worry, we're almost done with these things. And they say an unclean bird, perhaps. Again, there's that word perhaps in Strong's. The parrot, from its irascibility. A heron. Well, what's the root of it? It's from the Hebrew word 599, which is a naf, which means to be enraged, to breathe hard as in angry. So it's talking about an angry flying thing. So it could be any flying thing that actually gets angry or displays anger. I'll remind you, there are some birds, for example, that in the wild, when they get angry, their little feathers, stick up. But there's multiple flying things, multiple birds that actually do the same thing. It says in the lapwing. What's a lapwing? H1744. They say the hoopie, or else a geese or a grouse, a lapwing. All right, but here's the thing about this. The lexicon says a mountain cock. All right. Now, the fact of the matter is, when you look in the lexicon, you look in the actual Strong's, they don't really know what this is. They don't really know. That's why they say of uncertain derivative, that they say this, that, a lapwing, a grouse. But the fact of the matter is that we have to look at definitions, because we see the pattern, right? Moses has given us attributes. He's not naming animals. But they say a cock in the lexicon, and we know roosters are called cocks. Just saying, okay? Let's continue. Let's say the bat, verse 19. That's Hebrew 5847. Of uncertain derivative, a bat. So again, and then they say to be dark, something that's flying that's dark. All right? Or to be illid, which is E-L-I-D. Well, what does it mean to be illid? It means, it's from elide. It means to something omitted, something annulled. So basically, it comes back to the same point. They don't really know what it is. So they just tell us it's a bat. But they don't know. And then we don't get any actual Hebrew word that it comes from the root of. Anytime you're trying to look at something in Hebrew, if that Hebrew word does not have a definition that's given, but it has a root word that it comes from, you go and look at the root word to actually get a definition of what the word approximately means by the context. Let me say that again. If a Hebrew word does not have a definition, but it has a root Hebrew word that it comes from, you always go to the Hebrew word it comes from. And then you use that definition so you can get the context of where the word is listed to see what it means. So we don't know exactly what he's talking about there with a bat. We don't know. But we got all these different attributes to go on. But verse 20, Moses add a new thing into the mix. He says, all fowls, remember, fowl is anything that flies or has wings, that creep, going upon all four. So now, Moses went through all these animals. And now he's going to flying creatures, but it's in the same group. Because remember, Moses is still talking about flying creatures, something that has wings. He covered all these different attributes, and now he's talking about the ones that have 4 feet, that are 4-legged. I hope everybody see what this is about to come to. But those fowls are still the same thing. It's talking about something that flies, something that has wings and flies. But now he adds the word creep. Well, what does it mean to creep? That's Hebrew 83:18. And oh, you're going to be tripped out when you see this. What does it mean there, Hebrew 83:18, I'm sorry, charrettes? It means something that actually moves, that swarms, that moves. That's a large group of creatures that move, that go together. Well, guess what? Fish swarm, bees swarm. But we're not talking about fish. We're talking about only the fowl, the flying things. So Moses says in that actual verse, in 20, all fowls, same word used above when Moses started talking about the fowls, things that have wings and fly, that creep, talking about things that swarm, going upon all 4. Now he's talking about all 4 shall be an abomination to you. Now, when you look at that word for 4, it's Hebrew 7:02, arba, and it actually does mean 4, or something that has 4 corners, but it is talking about 4. Oh, but see, now the bombshell's about to hit us, everybody. Moses says all fowls in verse 20 that creep, that swarm, going upon all 4 shall be an abomination to you. Verse 21, yet these may you eat of every flying, creeping. Now let's stop there. Flying is the same word as fowls. Remember, Moses is talking about everything that has wings and flies. Of every flying, creeping there's the same word as creep in verse 20, Hebrew 83:18. So he says, you may eat of every flying fowl. That means things that have wings and fly. Creeping, again, things that swarm. Thing that goeth upon all 4, same word as in verse 24, which have legs above their feet to leap withal upon the earth. Stop for a second. Do y'all notice that in all this chapter we've been talking, in all these verses, starting at verse, 13? Moses started talking about flying things, right? Things that have wings and fly. Don't y'all see where we're getting at here? He named all these attributes in verses 13 through 19 that the King James translated in English as different animals. But then in verse 20 and verse 21, the only things out of the flying things that we can eat are the ones that actually fly or have wings and fly, that actually have 4 legs. Let me stop right here on the call. Do y'all see this? Have we been told anything that we can eat of any flying thing that has 2 legs yet? Everybody on the call, I want you to. I need to make sure you guys are with me, that you see this in the scripture for yourself. So can y'all respond for me? Okay. Does anybody not see this? Because again, that's why I said when I said before, this message here was going to be changing for us because it's going to require us to change. And again, that's why I told you, Brother CJ is not going to give you his definitions. He's going to define it from the scriptures and actually let you see, what it is. Okay? The fact of the matter is this. There's something going on here that in verse 21, Moses says, yet these may you eat of every creeping thing that goeth upon all four, which has legs above their feet. And I know somebody's saying, well, what's legs, brother? Okay, that's Hebrew 37:67. It's karah, and it actually is talking about a leg. It's from the knee to the ankle. All right, so it's talking about a leg. And then he says above their feet. When you look up the word above, and the reason I'm doing this because I know somebody else say, well, what are you talking about? That's ma'al, that's Hebrew 46:05, and it's talking about something above, something overhead, their feet. What is he talking about with feet? That's Hebrew H7272, and it's talking about a foot. Something or it's talking about something that could take a step, as in like to follow something or to hunt something or to take a journey. But it's talking about something used to take that journey or the steps. So we know that's a foot. To leap. What does it mean to leap? Hebrew 54:25, nethar. And it means it says to be violently agitated, to jump. To shake off, untie, to leap, to loose, to move. So, something that we know that it's something that moves, that's something that jumps. All right. I know that they translate sometimes as leap, undo, make, let loose, drive asunder. We always got to get context because we know translations have errors in them. But the point is that Moses gives us the attribute of what thing that has wings that can fly that we can eat. See, don't y'all notice? Remember when he was talking about the behemoths, the beast? He said what you could eat and what you couldn't eat. He gave the attributes. It's got to have a divided hoof and it has to chew its vomit. If it does one without the other, you can't eat it. Remember when he talked about the things that move in the waters? He didn't say fish. We think about fish when we think about things that are moving in the waters. But in fact, the matter is that they don't classify a whale as a fish. They classify a whale as a mammal. So the fact of the matter is that he said that it has to have fins and scales. And then he distinctly said, see, this is the thing about Moses. He distinctly said in every group of animals, if it doesn't have these characteristics, it is unclean to you. So he's doing the same thing now when he's talking about the things that have wings and fly. If it doesn't have four legs, and if it doesn't leap on the earth, you can't eat it.
I have a question.
Okay.
So are we now talking about insects and possible animals that are now extinct?
Hold on. So sis, we got to group it. He's talking about all things that fly or have wings. Simple as that. That means anything that has wings and that can fly. Anything.
With 4 legs.
That has 4 legs.
So now I'm asking the question.
What
else is out there with 4 legs that can fly if we're not talking about insects or animals that are no longer extinct?
No. You got to break it down simply.
I'm not a bird connoisseur, but I don't see too many things with 4 legs flying.
Right. There are no birds that have 4 legs. See, that's the whole point. Moses is talking about any fowl, anything that flies that have wings. The only things he says we can eat of anything that flies and has wings is something that has to have 4 legs. No bird that we've been eating has 4 legs. That's why I said that. That's why I said to everybody that I don't want you to think this brother CJ is saying this. No, I'm going by what Moses is saying. And we know Moses got the law from the Most High. So the Most High said this. Brother CJ didn't say this. The word says this. That's why I went through defining all these different words, because everybody's got to see it themselves. Now, I know somebody's thinking, well, what about the pigeons and the turtle doves that would be sacrificed on the altar? Oh, believe me, I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that. Because I know somebody will be thinking, well, brother, you're wrong because pigeons and turtle doves. A pigeon only has 2 legs. The Most High never did allow something unclean to be sacrificed on the altar. But we're going to get to that.
About the people.
Sis, it's got 2 legs. It don't have 4 legs. Remember, sis, if it ain't got 4 legs, you're not supposed to be eating it. Simple as that.
That means we ain't gonna be eating a lot of stuff then.
Right. But Maswar, let me finish up, okay? Let me go on through and finish up, sis. So here's the thing. All fowls, verse 20, that creep going upon all 4, Moses says, shall be an abomination unto you. But in verse 21, he's basically saying, except these fowl, because remember, flying in verse 21 is the same word translated as fowl in verse 20. See how King James translates that differently? Why does he translate it as flying in verse 21 and translate it as fowl in verse 20? That could be confusing to someone. And then he says creeping to give another attribute to the animal that you can eat, or to the thing, the living creature that you can eat. Right? That's talking about swarming, things that travel in large groups. So you may eat of every flying, thing that have wings and flies, creeping, things that swarms, that goeth upon all 4, which have legs above their feet to leap or jump upon the earth. Verse 22, even these of them ye may eat. Then they say the locust. Well, let's define what that means there when he says locust. That's H697, and it's arbe. And they translate it as locust or whatever, but it's talking about something that increases rapidly. Something that increases or reproduces rapidly. All right, something that multiplies. The root word it comes from is H7235, which is ravah, which means that it's something that actually that it multiplies through reproduction. So he didn't say locust. He said something that multiplies rapidly, that actually has wings, that can fly, and has 4 legs. On the call, we're getting some background, so if you can mute your background. But King James translates it as a locust. Y'all see the problem with here? After its kind, and the bald locust. What's a bald locust? A bald locust is Hebrew 5556, and that's solam, and it means it's the same as Hebrew 5553. Something that crushes rocks or consumes is what it's talking about. Something that is destructive because of how it consumes. Again, a locust can actually ruin your crops. All right? They can ruin your crops very quickly. You can ask a farmer about that. All right? Now, but it translates it as a bald locust. Then it says after its kind, and the beetle. Well, what's a beetle? Well, that's Hebrew 2728, cargol, and it's talking about something that leaps. It's from Hebrew 2727, which is karag, which means something that leaps suddenly, or it can be because it's afraid, or to be afraid. It's translated one time in the scriptures as afraid. All right, that's the root that it comes from. But it's some type of thing. The initial word there, which is translated there as a beetle, is Hebrew 2728, and it's talking about some type of insect that can leap. That's what it's talking about. Now, let's continue on. It says, and the grasshopper after its kind. What's a grasshopper? Hebrew 2284. Locust grasshopper. It says of uncertain derivative. So the fact of the matter is a leaper, it says in the lexicon. I'm just saying, everybody, when you look at this, Moses gave attributes. It's translated, the same word is translated as grasshopper 4 times, and it's translated as locust 1 time. I'm just saying, you got to see this for yourself here. So the thing is, verse 23, but all other flying, same word as fowl, something that has wings and flies, creeping things, same word as before, you know what I mean? 8318, something that swarms, which have 4 feet, shall be an abomination unto you. So, you may say, okay, well, this is kind of confusing, because verse 21 says, these may you eat of every flying, creeping thing that goeth upon all four, that has legs, that leaps upon the earth. But then in verse 23, all other flying, creeping things which has 4 feet shall be an abomination to you. The distinguishing characteristic is something that can leap. So let's look at what Moses said. He grouped chickens, turkeys, vultures, eagles, hawks, owls, flies, beetles. I'm just saying because what we all know that has different characteristics, right? All these things are things that can have wings, that can leap or fly. Horseflies, grasshoppers, crickets. A cricket can leap, but I don't know if it's got wings actually. So take that off. But he grouped all the things that can fly in one group. See, it's in English. We look at a grasshopper different, but the Most High said all the flying things. Now you may say, well, brother, are you sure about that? Well, I'll show you how sure I am about it, okay? Because when he's talking about flying things, when you go back in Genesis chapter 1, verse 20, he says, and the Most High said, let the waters bring forth the moving creature that hath life, and fowl, that they may fly above the earth in the open firmament of the heaven. Verse 21, and the Most High created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl. Verse 22, and the Most High said, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, let the fowl multiply in the earth. So, we can see here that the Most High, when he said fowl, we think of birds when we read Genesis 1, and think the Most High is talking about just birds. But no. When he said fowl, he was talking about everything that has wings and can fly, whether it has 2 legs or 4 legs. But Leviticus tells us the only ones out of the things you can eat that actually have wings, that can fly, they got to have 4 legs, and they got to be able to leap on the earth. So, does this not eliminate some things we've been eating? This is where I need everybody on the call to chime up, because I got to make sure you understand this before we go on. Does everybody see it? If everybody sees it, then cool, I can keep moving. But I got to make sure, does everyone see this? Because Masawar, like you pointed out, the last time I looked, a chicken or a vulture or a turkey, they don't have 4 legs, do they? They only have 2 legs. And you can't say that a wing is a leg, because the Bible gives a whole different word for the Bible is talking about a whole different thing. When it says fowl, that's what it's talking about, something that has wings. That's not a leg.
Yeah, the wings is considered a limb. It's like our arm.
Right, we consider it a limb, right. But it's not a leg. So does everyone see this? And I'm saying this because this might be something that's hard for us, because we've been eating chicken and turkey all our lives growing up. And I want you guys to know, when I saw this in the scriptures, I immediately asked Tara to go look at this. I immediately asked her, I said, please, keep me honest. Y'all know, and I'm going to say that the same to you guys. Keep me honest. Because I said, no, this can't be the truth. I said, this can't be it. I said, but when I look in the scriptures and even define these words in Hebrew, I realize the pattern here. Moses is given a set of animals. Notice that the behemoths were not called the fowls. The flying things were called fowl. Flying things. Sure. What's that word for fowl again there? It's Hebrew 5775, talking about ophe. So anything that flies or has wings is called ophe. That's what the Most High called them. He didn't call them insects or this and that. That's what man did. Man created those definitions. The Most High simply called them fowl, flying things. So this, by implication, this means you can no longer eat a chicken from this day forward, because it's unclean, because it simply doesn't have 4 legs. I'm just saying, that's one of the, And also, this means also you can't eat chicken eggs, because that still comes from an unclean animal. And that's why I said this one's going to...
I do have a question.
Yep.
You said, if you don't fully understand, then
yes, ma'am.
say something.
Right.
Okay. So what has 4 legs and wings?
Well, grasshoppers have 4 legs and wings.
I
Locusts
thought
do.
all insects had 8,
Had 8?
6 or 8.
No, so you got to think about it. You have what they call whiskers, or as Maswara would say, a maybe that's a type of limb, but a grasshopper has 4 legs, and it leaps.
Okay.
A locust, the same thing. You know, a locust and the grasshopper are closely related. To be honest with you, sis, those are the only things I could think of that even have. I mean, we know that John the Baptist, they said that his diet was what, locusts and honey, something like that. We'll have to define locust there to see if it's really talking about a locust. But that's the thing, sis. So now nothing. What we can say is this: even if you doubted whether you could eat a locust or a grasshopper, what you can't doubt is a chicken doesn't fit these characteristics of what you can eat. See, that we can't doubt no matter what, because the chicken doesn't have 4 legs.
Okay, so I got another question then.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when the children of Israel were in the wilderness and the Most High fed them with quail?
I already know. I'm going to it. Yep. Trust me.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Trust me. I'm going to cover it because I already know these are some of the other questions that would ask. Well, the pigeon, the turtle doves, and the quails. Trust me, sis, we're going there. We are. Because quails.
I wouldn't think pigeon or doves,
Say that again.
but the Most High did rain down the quail.
Mm-hmm. That's right. See, we got to define those things because we know the Most High wouldn't be using anything unclean to be sacrificed, and nor would he be giving the children of Israel any unclean animal to eat, would he? Then he'd be contradicting his own law, huh? That's right. Sis, we're going to go there. Trust me. Quails, pigeons, turtle doves, they're on the list. I'm going to cover them.
I have a comment,
Uh-huh.
but even to touch on what she said, as far as like, don't grasshoppers have 6 or 8 legs or whatever? I would say to even examine those bugs up close, because we're just going based on kind of what
we've been taught.
But I've never fully examined a grasshopper, so really maybe it's not a grasshopper.
Right.
Maybe that's the incorrect assumption on us, just like we incorrectly assume that chickens were clean to eat all this time, even though now thinking about it, they're actually act filthy. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So, but we're going to cover the pigeon, the turtle dove, and the quail, sis, because you're right. That's the question. That's a question that has to be answered because that's something else someone's going to think of. And they're right to think about it because, again, we're going to show how translation, and I said that translation has gotten in the way. That's why I said that this lesson goes right along with the lesson that we did called Study to Show Yourself Approved Part 1, because we talked about examples of where translations errors have crept in, and we believe the translation and not what the actual Hebrew or Greek behind it states. So Ecclesiastes 2 and 8, again, that's just one that you can look up off your head if anybody wants to know. Where they translate the Hebrew word shadah there as a musical instrument when it's really a concubine. But again, that's just one of those spots where you can kind of see. Does anyone else have any other questions here so far what we covered? See, we have to make sure about this because Passover is coming up, and here's the thing. Lots of us will probably be making things that would have eggs in it. Or chicken broth. And we got to make sure everyone's clear on this and they can see it for themselves. Whether you doubt or not a locust or a grasshopper is clean or not, that's fine because we know that Moses was given attributes. Moses never named animals. He gave attributes. That's okay if you doubt those can be eaten as well. Personally, I don't want to eat a locust or a grasshopper anyway. But the point is that he did tell us what we couldn't eat. And if you notice, the only thing he said we could eat are the fowl, the flying things that have wings. It's got to have 4 legs and it's got to leap. That eliminates chickens. That eliminates turkeys. They only have 2 legs.
I was going to say, anybody feeling froggy, do not bring any grasshoppers or locusts. I'm not going to eat it. Start today.
Yeah.
I'll eat some salad all day long. But that's exactly what we're eating back to. So,
Yeah.
But I'm not going to start eating those insects.
Right. Yeah, I hear you.
And then we even have to be careful on our salad dressings because, like Caesar dressing, some of the ranch dressings, they use eggs.
That's right. And don't worry, y'all. We're going to define that word egg that's in the book of Job. We're going to define it because,
And water.
yeah,
Vinegar and oil.
because the fact of the matter is we know someone's thinking, hey, well, Job mentioned an egg. We're going to define it. So here's the thing. In this chapter, though, because now, after verse 23, it starts talking about in verses 24 on down to 26, it talks about the carcasses, right? Of, how we are to handle the dead bodies of animals and things like that. So here's the thing, verse 27. It says, and whatsoever goeth upon his paws. Okay, what's a paw? Well, a paw is Hebrew 3709, and it's talking about the hollow or the palm of a hand, the paw of an animal. All right, it's pretty clear about it's talking about basically their foot or something like that. Among all manner of beasts. Now again, they got beast there, but it shouldn't be beast. It should be kai. It's actually kai, which means all living things that go on all four, those are unclean unto you. Whosoever toucheth their carcass shall be unclean until the even. Now here's the thing we notice. We know that he's not talking about a cow because a cow has hooves, right? But we know animals other animals do have paws, all right? They go on all four that are not foul, that don't have wings, okay? And before somebody mentions an ostrich, whether you believe it or not, and an emu, they do have wings and they can fly short distances. I just want to say that because that's somebody I saw, that's something I know somebody would ask a question of, which still would make them unclean because they don't have four legs and they got to have four legs still. So he's talking about these things that have paws that go on all four. They're going to be unclean, until the even. In verse 27, he's still talking about carcass there. So let's go on to 29. These also shall be unclean unto you among the creeping things. Now, here's the thing. That word creeping things is the same word as before when talking about the fowl. So talking about something that swarms, travels in large groups. But he says that creep, which is now a different word, 83:17, which is slightly different. All right. And it's talking about something that moves along the ground itself. So it's not talking about something necessarily that swarms. It's talking about something that actually moves along the ground. And I base that on going into the root of it and all these different things. All right. And there's also something that breeds, abundantly, things like that. All right. But it's a different kind of creep from creeping things. And then he says, of course, the weasel. Again, Moses didn't say a weasel. All right. But when you look up the Hebrew word there, which is koled, Hebrew 2467, it's talking about something that glides as in motion. All right. The root of it is 2465, which is talking about an age or a duration of life. At least that's what Strong says. But it means to glide swiftly, as in fleeting. So it's something that actually glides on all four that's down on the land. It's not something that actually is a fowl. It's not something that flies. All right. Then he talks about the mouse, Hebrew 5909, which is akbar. And again, it means something that nibbles. All right. Something that nibbles. So see how Moses kept giving descriptions. And the tortoise, that's Hebrew 6632. And it's something that's like a canopy, something that still glides, that moves upon the earth, that has a canopy-like shape or whatever. They translate it as a tortoise. Okay, but it means like it's carrying something like a wagon, because the same word is translated wagon even in the Bible as well. See, this is why you got to go into the Hebrew and you got to get the context of how these words are used. Then you can understand. A turtle is like carrying a wagon on its back almost. It lives in a shell. They pronounce it as a turtle, but Moses didn't say a turtle. He just simply said something that has a canopy light, that carries something like a canopy or something. Verse 30, and the ferret. What's a ferret? Hebrews 604. They say an unclean animal. You know, Strong's got his whole things. They says probably a gecko. All right. But it comes from the word Hebrews 603. And it's something that shrieks, that cries out, that groans, that sighs. Again, hey, they translated it as a ferret, but the fact of the matter is that Moses is still giving the characteristics. And again, it's the same thing going on, you know what I mean? Because if we go through all these simple things, we'll be hours and hours. Like, for example, verse 32, when he says, he's talking about again, and upon anything, any of them which when they are dead doth fall, it shall be unclean, whether it be a vessel of wood, raiment of skin, sack, whatever vessel it be wherein any work is done, it must be put into water, and it shall be unclean until the evening. So that's going into some different things slightly on that. The thing I wanted to cover here is diet specifically. All right. So I'm going to leave off from this chapter, and I'm going to go to now quails, because Sister Nell brought that point up, and that is something we need to look at. So Exodus 16 and 13 is where it's talking about the Most High bringing the quails up. Now, that word for quail is Hebrew 79:58. And we're going to see something about this here word. Hebrew 79:58, which is salav. They say it's a quail, but here's the thing. The definition is something that moves sluggishly due to weight. All right? It's slow in flying, whatever, because of its weight. All right? That's a quail. Let me ask everybody a question. Why do they actually translate it as a quail? Is it actually a characteristic being given here? We know that it can't really be a quail that the Most High brought up from the waters, because let's use some common sense here. The Most High already told us in Leviticus that you can't eat something that if it flies or have wings, it's got to have at least 4 legs. So then we know that it can't be a literal quail that they brought up, that the Most High brought up for the children of Israel to eat, right? Because again, when we define what a quail is, it says they're through the ideal of sluggishness. Then they say the quail collectively, as it's slow in flight because of its weight. So it's sluggish in flying. Well, let's look up the word it comes from, which is shalah, which it means something to be tranquil or secure. Something that's set, happy or prosper in safety. That don't really give us a lot to go on, does it? The only thing we can say for sure is when they translated it as saying something that's a quail, all we know is it's something that moves slow, that can have wings. That's all we know. Is there any defining characteristic there that tells us that this is really a quail? Anybody? Is it? Because I don't see anything there that proves to me that's a quail. What I see is they don't know what it was, and they just translated it as a quail. But keep me honest, everybody. What say you guys? Anybody got any objections? Sister Nell, what do you think?
No objections from me.
I mean, y'all keep me honest. We don't know what that was the Most High brought up. And I'll give you another example. We talk about manna, right? Let's use that as an example. When we talk about manna. Now, Sister Merlene, this is going to be easy for you probably. In verse 15, when he talks about manna, does anyone know really what manna is? Well, let's look it up in the Hebrew. That's H4478. And it says literally a whatness, so to speak, so called from the question about it. So it would be like they were saying it's manna. We don't know what it is. Manna itself is not necessarily a food type. Manna is in the Hebrew expression saying it's manna. I don't know what it is. Sister Merlene, keep me honest. Or anybody else. You know what I mean? Okay, got it. So my whole point is that when it says manna, it's a question. They're saying it's literally a whatness. It's meaning it will be like kind of like if we said what or how or why or something like that. It will be like what kind. It will be like what. We don't know what it is. That's why they called it manna. You know what I mean? As an expression. Because they didn't know what it was. But what about, and I hope everybody sees that whole thing with quail. Like I said, we don't know what the quail was. Just like manna, they didn't know what it was. What we do know is that they translated it as quail, that word there, but we know it couldn't have been a quail because a quail only has 2 legs, and according to Leviticus, we cannot eat anything that has wings or fly that has only 2 legs. So, next thing, turtle dove. Well, what's a turtle dove? Because remember, these were sacrificed on the altar, correct? Well, we see the first mention of a turtle dove in Genesis 15 and 9. So what's there a turtle dove? It's H8449. And it means, and it's the Hebrew word toreh. And it means, and they say it's a ring dove. It's something that's a term of endearment. From the root word H8447, which means something that goes in a stream, something that goes in succession. Tell me, does that tell us that it's a turtle dove? Yeah, doves do go in succession on one another, but a dove will be unclean because it only has 2 legs. So it can't be a dove that the Most High was saying. But again, y'all keep me honest. What about when he says a pigeon? Same verse in Genesis. That's Hebrew 1469. They pronounce it a young pigeon. They say it's a young pigeon. But it simply means a nestling. Well, again, does that tell us for sure that it's actually a pigeon? Again, I'll call you back to Leviticus 11. You know, we can't eat anything that doesn't have 4 legs. When you talk about nestling, in the definition, they say it's a young bird that's not yet old enough to leave the nest, a young child or infant. So when it's talking about something that's nestling, it's talking about something whatever that actually can't, that's actually part of a group of something that is still under its, I guess you would say that it's still under its parents' care, because the word there could apply, that word, same word there is translated as young in one place, where it's talking about in Deuteronomy 32, when it's talking about an eagle, how an eagle, they say eagle, how it actually stirred up her nest and actually spread her wings abroad her young. Again, they translate it as pigeon though. But we know it can't be a pigeon because a pigeon is unclean. So again, y'all tell me, am I off or what? Am I off or are we on point? Same word is used of a young pigeon in Leviticus 12 and 6. Same word for turtle dove from Genesis 15 is in Leviticus 12 and 6. Again, Moses told us attributes, all right, but he didn't tell us what the animal was. They guessed when they told us in English what they think the animal was. But the Most High is not going to be sacrificing something unclean on the altar. He's not going to do that. Anybody got any comments or any questions about that?
Nope.
All right, well, what about an egg? Well, Job 6:6. In verse 6, he said, "Can that which is unsavory be eaten without salt? Or is there any taste in the white of an egg?" Oh, let's define this here. So when he says in the white, that's Hebrews 73:88, and it's pronounced rare, and it means broth or spittle, saliva. All right, now here's the interesting thing about it. When you go in 1 Samuel 21:13, it actually is pronounced as spittle. And Job is pronounced as, it's translated as spittle in 1 Samuel. And Job is translated as the white. But we know it's talking about the actual, some type of liquid. But he says the liquid, so we said the white or liquid of an egg. What's an egg? That's Hebrew 24:95. And it means something that is actually I'm trying to, how do you actually say this? It's talking about something that actually is binded firmly, maybe plump, maybe something that's dense. For example, the word they use is insipidity. All right, I know it, insipidity. Well, what does that mean? It means something that has stimulating qualities, something that's vapid, something that's without taste to be pleasing, something bland. All right, so they translate that as egg, but y'all tell me, is this literally talking about an egg? Or is he really talking about something that actually may be in a liquid that's actually tasteless or bland? Just saying that. Then look at the whole sentence of Job 6:6. Can that which is unsavory be eaten without salt? Or is there any taste in the white of an egg? In the whole, and I'm gonna tell y'all what's crazy about it. I had not even looked at the whole scripture before defining white of an egg to y'all. But that's what Job's talking about, something that's bland in taste. They translated it as an egg. But it's talking about something that can be dense, plump, that's tasteless, that's bland. Now, some of us have probably, when working out, ate a raw egg. A raw egg is something that's not tasty. And even Tara's making expressions right now. But the point is, that's not something that's tasty. People do that and everything for the protein value of it. But the point of the matter is that that's what it says. They translated it as an egg. Again, y'all keep me honest. Stop me if I'm saying anything wrong. Y'all know, call me out about it. Have I said anything wrong yet? Have I injected anything of my own words into this? Or can you all see it for yourself? Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Could I ask a question now?
Absolutely.
I know you were trying to keep you honest, and so I think I'm having a struggle because when this was translated or transliterated or however it was done, you know, we know that a lot of meanings were actually, I think, they were meant to lead us astray, I believe.
Right.
And so I'd like to just read something that I had to go back about the English language to find out, well, what was that language basically. I found out that the language was used as what they said, equivocal language.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And what that meant was, you know, it is a doubtful advantage or double genuineness and doubtful moral receptitude, rightness of principle or practice, correctness, freedom from error. You remember when they used to have the old movies, they used to say the pale, but it just meant pale-faced speak with full tongue, right? But what they were trying to tell us, I think about the language was that it's of uncertain significance, not that right.
What?
Ambiguous.
Okay. You said uncertain derivative or ambiguous, right?
Right, and which went on to say that that which is equivocal is equally capable of two or more interpretation and is usually intended to be so for the purpose of mystifying or confusing.
Yes.
Okay, now, when we started asking about hell and this and that, and we understood that in the Hebrew language, we couldn't necessarily find out what certain words were because you might not have a Q in the Hebrew language, right?
Right.
In English. Okay, so which goes more to the point that when you started talking about to be honest and how we're going to look at these words, but we wouldn't have an idea sometime of how to go about finding out the English with the Hebrew translation of certain words because it doesn't, equate with some of this English. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
You understand? So I was trying to find out basically how we go about really trying to find and go back to getting the Hebrew etymology of something. And I think one of the things that we found out is that when they came in Jerusalem and they destroyed a lot of things and they went and took these books and so forth, it was meant for some people to be expert in something that we were supposed to be expert in, and then we were taken away from that particular knowledge, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that we went through some of this because we got a more in-depth understanding of what these things meant. Instead of following behind names, we got characteristics and attributes to go by to identify what we're supposed to be possible.
Yes, sir.
And I know you stressed that today, and that means we got to go back and restudy and revisit these chapters to go and look at these attributes and characteristics to determine, what we're supposed to be doing.
Right, and brother Q, Hugh, I actually respect what you're saying too, because we know that as a lost people, a lot has been lost to us, and the thing what we have to appreciate though is that the Most High in His providence still made a way so that many of these terms and definitions can still make their way to us today. Now the problem is that when you look at the Messiah and the way He spoke to the disciples, the Bible says He spoke to them in parables. When you think about that, that means that when He spoke in parables, that means they had to kind of look for it. He kind of led them kind of like with breadcrumbs, and they had to look for the deeper meaning to it. When you look at the whole scriptures today, we have breadcrumbs. But the breadcrumbs actually lead us to what the Most High is telling us. And see, that's the thing where we have to actually have faith and confidence in the Most High, that the information we needed, that we still need today, has survived all the way up to our time, because He in His providence would have made a way, because then it could be said then, well, we don't know, so we have an excuse. And see, the Most High doesn't want people that have excuses. Now, the Bible does say that He winked at us in our time of ignorance. And I'll give you an example of that. For example, most of us, I'm sure, on this call has still been eating chicken and turkey because we thought it was clean meat to eat, correct? And so as a result, we thought we were doing righteously. We prayed, the Most High answered our prayers and all kinds of things. We saw all kinds of evidence that He was with us, right? I know I could say the same myself. But see, when the Most High then brings clarity to a thing, and this is why, I'm going to say, this is why we need one another. Because this is why all the brothers and sisters, we should say also out there today, that are acting like they have all the truth and that it's only them, this is why they're liars. They are liars. Because the fact of the matter is, the Most High doesn't give it all to one person. He gives us all a little piece of it. And our job as believers is to come together, share the pieces that the Most High has given us so that we can all become on one accord. But see, in this day and age, that doesn't happen because people have an ego. That's why I said before, I don't have an ego, because the thing is this, when even talking about this very subject, the Most High used Sister Sally to bring this to my attention. You see what I'm saying? That shows that the Most High values her as part of the body to give clarity to the body. And see, when the interesting thing about it, when Sister Sally had shared with me this video, I wasn't even going to watch it. All right. I was just like, we already know, because I was thinking about how the Bible talks about us being tossed with all sorts of winds of doctrines. But then I said, no, I'm not going to be dismissive, because that's what leads us astray also. I'm going to hear what the brother has to say, but I'm going to check him on everything he says. I'm going to check it to make sure. And what I found was the brother himself that did the message is a brother on Facebook. His name is Dean Smith, I think. I'll have to look it up and let everybody know, but his name is Dean something. And he was doing it from the standpoint of only talking about chicken. Just wanted to disprove that we shouldn't be eating chicken. All right. He didn't even mention turkey. He even said himself that he eats quails. And what I ended up doing was I actually messaged him about it all, and I told him, I think the Most High, his name is Dean Parker. You can look him up on Facebook if you want, Dean Parker. And I messaged him and I said, well, brother, I said, but, because I went and explored the rest of it. And I told him, I said, well, brother, you mentioned chicken, but there's other animals it also eliminates, like turkey and things like that. And him and I had a little exchange. And then the last thing he said, you know what? He said, he said, I'm interested, actually. He said, you may be on to something, actually. And so I haven't heard back from him since. Because the thing is, when looking at the chapter, enough of it, Brother Hugh, is what I'm saying, enough of things has survived down to our point so that the Most High can still tell us what he approves of and what he doesn't approve of. And here's the thing, if it's something that we have a question of, then we should avoid it until we know for sure. But my point, going back to it, is this. When it comes to languages, transliteration, yes, we did lose a lot. But the Most High, I trust the Most High that he's had enough survive to this point where we can actually still know what we should and should not do. And see, that's where it comes back to for me, Brother Hugh, because as you heard me breaking down some of these words in Leviticus, some of these words, we don't know what they mean. We really don't. But in English, they guessed and said, oh, it means this. It means a weasel. But the fact of the matter is we don't know. So the only thing we can do is look at what Moses gave us, because he gave us enough to know what we can and cannot eat. So we see through the list, we can't eat anything that has two legs, because one thing we're definitive of is the word legs in Hebrew. We know what that means. So we know it has to have 4 legs at least. If it's got wings and it flies, it has to have at least 4 legs. We know by definition, a chicken, a turkey, a quail, a turtle dove, they do not have 4 legs. So my point is saying that, Brother Hugh, and I hope you see my point, is that we have enough, though, to know still what we can eat and cannot eat, because Moses gave attributes. And so I approach the whole of Scripture that way, Brother Hugh, because the Most High has given us enough so that we can still have the things we need today. And that's where the whole thing comes back. I just trust that the Most High is giving us enough. The whole problem is, and this is some way can be looked at as a problem, is that it's kind of like breadcrumbs, because we have the book of Enoch, the book of Jasher, the book of Jubilees, but we noticed that the scholars, they took it out of our regular Bible, but it's still available. See, that's the interesting thing. The Most High still made it available, so we can at least read it. And then what do? We take what's said in those books and we compare it to the Bible, where we have the actual original scripts too. And if it actually disagrees with the canon, then we know that that's false, because we can look behind most of the words in the canon to get a precise definition. I'm sorry, brother, if I was long-winded, but I hope that makes sense.
Oh, no. And you know what? I'm sorry, family, if I'm taking up too much time, but
No, you good. You good.
but one of the things that I understood, somebody gave me some information, and I don't know if it's relevant, but I'm going to say this and get off, taking up the time. But it said the concordance is a dictionary of the godly. They went on to say the way to use it is basically to decode the Bible. And then they said the Bible is a coded book, not meant to be taken literally. When you read the Bible and you take it word for word, it is for fish. Then they went on to say that fish are uneducated, uninformed, lower levels of people, Bible readers, ignorant, low thinkers, take the Bible word for word. Then they went on to say these creepy things that was middle class people, more or less, that have some, like understanding of the Bible. And then they went on to say all informed, thought processes that are ruling everybody else. So I understand that basically he's supposed to be doing this. These brothers, thank you for you and for everybody else. He pushes us to want to study the Bible more and dig deeper into its secrets. And we're supposed to, like you said, keep you honest, but it's also keeping us honest. And there's people that want problems so more. I didn't have a problem. I sat in Christian churches for a while and said, yeah, I understood things that I didn't understand what they were saying because I disagreed with them and I didn't say it. I thank you for, I'm going to get off now. Thank y'all for being patient with me.
Yeah, no problem, brother. And brother, you're okay because you're right. See, this is why I recommend everyone watch the lessons, the history of the King James that we did, where we talked about that, because you went into some points about that, and this is not to down the King James Bible, but this is just to admonish us to study harder, because we've been given things in breadcrumbs, like in parables. There are some things in the Bible that can be taken literally, some things that are not to be taken literally. But that's where context is always key. And so when you think about, like you said, brother, about the translations of the Bible, I went through that in talking about the history of it, that they at first did the translations for the people that were more well known. It wasn't done for the common people. It was done for the aristocracy, the aristocrats, the important people is what they made these things for. But you can see that even though they made these things like a concordance and translations for the aristocracy, the so-called important people and rich people, you can see that they were actually running a game on them too, because they were trying to frame their thoughts according to what they wanted them to believe. So now you got all sorts of people now, even Hebrews, believing that we can eat all these different things, chicken and turkeys and things like that we can't eat, not according to the Bible. So it's one of those things, brother, where your comments are point on. And let me make sure, was there any other point I need to bring out, Tara, on this? I brought out the point about egg. Even in the New Testament, it mentions an egg, and it's in Luke chapter 11, verse 12. And where it says, I'll start at verse 11. If a son shall ask bread of any of you that is a father, will he give him a stone? Or if he ask a fish, will he for a fish give him a serpent? Or if he shall ask an egg, will he give him a scorpion? Guess what? That Greek word for egg is Greek 5609. And guess what? It just says apparently a primary word, an egg. Doesn't really tell us what it is. All we know that is some substance of food. The point, and see, that's where Brother Hugh gets back to a point you made. When it's a word that we don't have a clear definition of it, we have to look at the context of the verse. The verse is basically saying, if his son asks his father for something that will sustain him for food, will he offer him something that will not sustain him instead? See how, Brother Hugh, I flipped that to look at the context of it, despite the fact that they don't actually tell me what this egg is. So see, the point that the Most High wants to get to us is still there. The point being, if you ask for some sustenance from your father, is he going to give you something that does not sustain you? That's the point we got to take, because that's the same thing being asked, that's being questioned or being said in verse 11 of Luke 11. So see how the Most High still provides for us, Brother Hugh? He's still providing us an answer, and he's still giving us the point of what he's saying. And that's the thing we have to look at. Is the point that the Most High is still conveying to us, is the point still there, even if they use certain words that they don't give us a clear definition of? So I hope that makes sense. Anybody else have any question? at this point, we're done with the lesson. I do want to thank everybody. We've been on here for 2 hours and 9 minutes, and everyone knows I try to keep everything at about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. But it was very important in this one that we didn't break it up. And so, if you give me a moment, I'm gonna stop the recording. And to those out there in YouTube land, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.